How you guys all doing? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiaga, live today on Friday, June the 28th. I got a great show planned for you guys today, as you all know, talking about some more stories around the NFL, starting with a recent report inclining that CeeDee Lamb is more expected to hold out into training camp than originally thought. There were those contract negotiations going on. Nobody really knew if he was going to hold out now. It seems to be that he will be holding out into training camp set to start in a few weeks. Then a deeper look at the coach's situation in New York with Brian Daboll, Wink Martindale, and some disagreements that went on behind the scenes that sort of led to this 6-11 season that the Giants had this past year. Then also we're going to do some more grading on some off seasons in the AFC North, talking Ravens, Browns, Bengals, and Steelers, all on today's show, plus much more. So please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. And also, if you have any questions or comments, use the tip and donations link, gsmcpodcast.net. By using that link that you see on your screen, I'm able to see your question or comment, read it on air, and that way get your guys' thoughts on anything I say or on any of the topics on today's show. It's a massive help for this show and the network, so please use the tip and donations link if you have any questions or comments on today's episode. But we're going to get started with the first topic on today's show is CeeDee Lamb. Some more talk about the Dallas Cowboys. Recently, we discussed how Dallas, according to all other sources around the Dallas Cowboys, indicated that Dak Prescott was the priority at this moment. They valued Dak to be first on their list of all the contract negotiations, or really the big three that they have to get done in the next few years: Dak, CeeDee, and Micah. Micah, you have more time, probably until 2026, but with Dak being on the last year, CeeDee also being in his fifth year as well with that fifth-year option, the indications that we received from these sources were that Dak was a priority, and that seems logical, right? He is the quarterback. Really, when push comes to shove, I think most teams would side on keeping a quarterback rather than anything else. You know how hard it is to try and find a guy to perform at the level that Dak has proven over the last few years. You can see their point of view as to why they are the priority, but with that comes some consequences, obviously. And then talking about CeeDee Lamb, now you have a new report, according to the Dallas Morning News. A reporter, Calvin Watkins, reported that Lamb is not expected to show up to training camp unless he's got an extension agreed upon with the Dallas Cowboys. He has already been skipping out all the offseason programs thus far, OTAs, mandatory minicamps, and just the strength and conditioning initial portion of the offseason. So this has been going on, and I guess to some it might not be a surprise if he's already skipped a good amount, basically all of the offseason, to train by himself. This could be right along the path of what people expected, but CeeDee made some comments before saying that he expects to be in Dallas this year. He expects to be playing this year, so some people held out some hope that he could be playing, at least back into training camp, with how pivotal it seems to be this season, with Jerry Jones saying they're going all in. Dak could be his last year as well, and it's just always a big year for the Cowboys, trying to finally get over the hump. He's supposed to make some big money. He already proved it last year. And now they're heading into a pivotal year this year where we don't really know where any of these guys stand. And along those lines of missing training camp, as it is projected that he will be, that comes along with also some more consequences if you're CeeDee Lamb. The fines, he was already fined for missing mandatory minicamp, but that wasn't too much. I think it was close to, well, I say too much, it all comes into perspective, right? Not too much for these guys, obviously, but it was close to almost $100,000 in fines. But for missing training camp, every day you miss training camp, it's a $50,000 fine for each day you missed. But there's a little loophole in here for CeeDee Lamb. Thinking back to the contract negotiations with Nick Bosa last year when he held out, he was also subject to these fines, but the 49ers waived them. And according to the new CBA that just was recently agreed upon in 2020, teams are not allowed to waive fines at all, but there's an exemption that exists in the CBA currently for players on rookie contracts. That is where obviously CeeDee Lamb falls in, still being on that 5th-year option. So they do have that option to waive him if they truly feel that an extension could get done. It wouldn't be too detrimental to CeeDee. Obviously, there's the money, but if they could waive it, if they're feeling good about getting an extension done, they're probably going to waive it, and it doesn't really hurt CeeDee Lamb too much up until this point from that point of view. But Calvin Watkins, the reporter from the Dallas Morning News, also mentioned that the Cowboys officials, the main decision makers, Jerry Jones, Stephen Jones, and all the officials in the Cowboys organization have stated that they don't want to set markets with any of their extensions. And that's a pivotal point, obviously, because the way everything's set up, the longer you wait, it's almost like that's your only option, really, right? The longer you wait on Dak, Jordan Love could get signed, Tua could agree to an extension. You already saw Trevor Lawrence almost reset the market, equaling the highest salary for a quarterback currently in the NFL. So the longer you wait, you might not be left with any other option to reset the market or at least equal it, which, give or take a few, what's the difference with equaling it and resetting the market by $1 million more? What I mean? So the longer they wait, they set themselves up to have that as their only option, not only for Dak, but also obviously for CeeDee Lamb. He thinks he's made a good case for himself to be paid like one of the highest, if not the highest paid receiver in the NFL. Justin Jefferson just got $35 million per year. I would be crazy to think that CeeDee would not want anything close to that at all in his new contract, so he won't take anything, I'm assuming, less than 33. I would only imagine maybe 34 or exactly 35. Not that much wiggle room for the Dallas Cowboys. If their intention is to not reset the market, again, they're not left with much choice there. And also, with all these markets just exploding, you can only imagine what Micah Parsons could be making in 2025 or 2026 if the Cowboys decide to get it done ahead of time or just wait until the last minute like they have been doing recently. So, again, you sort of lay in the bed that you made with the Dallas Cowboys, holding on to these extensions, not getting it done ahead of time. They find themselves between a rock and a hard place right now. So if Dak, will Dak get $55 million or less? Are the Cowboys offering the market price as of right now for CeeDee and for Dak? That's a question that pops up, right? What is holding up these extensions? Are the Cowboys just not offering enough, or is Dak potentially just holding his cards to try and squeeze out any much more money than he can? It doesn't seem like it. I mean, based on his comments, he has said that he doesn't play for money. He doesn't play to be the highest paid quarterback, but you're just left wondering what are holding up these extensions. Are the Cowboys just not offering anything? Is the ball in their court and they're just sitting on it, waiting for whatever reason? All these things should start to pop into your head of why is it taking so long? And back to the original point I made to start this segment with Dallas holding Dak as that priority, and you can sort of understand if Dak is sitting on his hands and not really being too urgent to try and get a contract negotiation done, because he could squeeze out more of a higher salary, $57, maybe $56 million if he waits until Tua or Jordan Love get their new contracts. So if he's doing that and he remains the priority, it almost just pushes CeeDee Lamb away and excludes him a little bit, because if you're so dead on making Dak the priority, or he is the priority, and you don't want to change that at all, then where does that leave CeeDee? What kind of message does that send to CeeDee Lamb if you're valuing Dak so much more than him and making him the priority right now that you won't negotiate with CeeDee or try to get something done with him? What does that say to CeeDee Lamb with this relationship with the Cowboys and himself? Doesn't send a great message. So to me, at this point, if Dak still remains a priority and CeeDee is sort of pushing the buttons a little bit more than Dak is at this moment, and the inclination is that he will sit out, he will hold out of training camp, I think the Dallas Cowboys have to surrender a little bit here and maybe I would make CeeDee the priority right now, just because I think, again, I said this before, I mentioned this point before, if Dak wasn't the quarterback, I don't think he would be the priority, in my opinion, just on how he's performed in some of the biggest moments. I think CeeDee has done more and proven more for what he has been given for what he is, a wide receiver. Wide receivers can only do so much. It all falls on the quarterback, and most of the time at least. And with Dak, I think you've almost reached the limit here with Dallas Cowboys and this relationship with Dak. For right now, if Dak is still sitting on it and they're still waiting on it and pushing CeeDee's contract back so much further, I think you almost have to switch it here and now turn your attention to making CeeDee the priority just because he is holding out. And you don't want this thing to just continue to drag on because somebody has to get an extension. I know people want to wait to all these other contract extensions get done. That is the personal goal, to get as much money as you would want out of this whole thing, but someone has to be the first one. Someone has to take the first step. And if the Cowboys are being stubborn, Dak potentially being stubborn, he hasn't shown any signs that he is going to hold out, but CeeDee has. So I think the Cowboys are just right now going to have to swallow their pride a little bit here, maybe turn their attention to CeeDee and start talking to him a little bit more, maybe more so than Dak, if they're not making any progress with the contract extension for Dak Prescott. That's just me. I might value CeeDee a little too high compared to some other people, but I think he's proven he is worth over $32 million, over 31. That is the market, and you don't take many receivers better or many receivers ahead of CeeDee Lamb, I should have said, in this day and age. Amon-Ra's up there. Justin Jefferson definitely is one that you would certainly take over him, but other than that, there's not too many. You can make an argument, I guess, for A.J. Brown, but he's making $32 million, so that's at least where CeeDee Lamb probably values himself at right now. I think you have a clearer picture right now with CeeDee, and he is inclined to hold out right now, so if you start talking to him now, maybe you can get something done before training camp if those allegations, these speculations turn out to be true. That's just me. Dak seems to want to be at training camp. It doesn't seem like he's going to hold out, so you're not really losing anything there, I believe, just on what we've seen. But tricky situation for the Cowboys. Every day that passes by just turns out to be worse. The longer they wait, the worse the situation gets, the more expensive it gets for the Cowboys. But we'll see how this all turns out. Could be the last season for both of these players, could be the last season for only one of them. We shall see. A lot is building towards this 2024 season, not just for the Cowboys, but for other teams. We're going to go to a quick break and mentioning the Cowboys and all those other teams around them in their division. We're going to take a look at the New York Giants when we return, talking on the coaches' side of things with them, the disgruntled relationship between Wink Martindale and New York Giants head coach Brian Daboll. How did that all collapse during last year in 2024, and what were the reasons behind it? What was being said behind the scenes? We're going to take a deeper look into that when we return. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit. A stupid myth, you choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
We are back here now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to delve a little bit deeper, still in the NFC East, talking about the New York Giants and their coaching staff. As fans, when you look at the sort of season that the Giants had last year, a very bad one compared to what they did the season before, making the playoffs, winning a playoff game, and then to come back down to earth and have a 6-11 record. It's not that great. You're left wondering why. What happened? What caused such a drastic change in winning a playoff game, then getting absolutely destroyed in the next game, but you still won a game. But then how did you fall so far below? As fans, you can only really speculate, and that's why I found this story so fascinating by ESPN's Jordan Raanan. He published the story yesterday, more looking at the behind-the-scenes look of the New York Giants coaching staff, and really involving Brian Daboll and Wink Martindale mainly, and other assistants thrown in there, at how this dynamic, this relationship between all of them started to boil over a little bit. And before I get into the quotes, you can almost understand it. You could go back to speculating, like I mentioned, as fans. You look at the Giants, a bad season to start off, 6-11 record, coming off of a just bad seasons prior to 2022. Before that, just mediocre, not great seasons. Before that, you have all the media pressure coming from the market that you're in New York, the job security of Brian Daboll, and even general manager JioSaavn, and all the coaching staff, really. Things usually start to boil over when all these things start to pile up. Things get a little bit heated in there, and that's sort of where this story starts to come into fruition a little bit more. ESPN's Jordan Raanan, like I mentioned, dove into it a little bit more, and he brought up a quote that I thought was really interesting that got all of this sort of rolling here with his story. He said, sources close to the situation said that Martindale, along with several other coaches on both sides of the ball, had grown tired of Brian Daboll's frequent outbursts. Daboll's staff felt that he'd stopped listening, and there was constant finger pointing, and so on and so on. He went into a little bit deeper, but that was the main basis of where this all started with the New York Giants. On top of that report, Brian Daboll also fired outside linebackers coach Drew Wilkins and also defensive assistant coach Kevin Wilkins, who were both very close to Wink Martindale. And after those firings, there was no real secret as to why Wink Martindale resigned in January. And that whole situation, when it all came out back in January and around that time, I didn't really pay too much attention to it. I just assumed it was typical, just teams changing, going through coaches, just moving on when things don't go well. But this shines a little bit more light on it as to why things didn't go the right way for the Giants. Things might not go the right way, but you don't really know the reason why, other than you just need results. Yeah, I think Mike Tomlin always says this quote where they're in football is like their business, but they're in the field of winning, something along those lines. And it makes the most sense. Winning solves everything. Winning is really what it comes down to. And I just thought that was the main reason, but this makes it a little bit more interesting because you go deeper into some of these quotes that Jordan Raanan said. And one thing that one defensive coach said was that we were all sort of trying to get out of there, was another statement that a non-defensive coach mentioned, according to ESPN. Raanan continued to expand on the situation a little bit more with the relationships between these coaches in Week 11, specifically when apparently general manager JioSaavn began listening in on the communications between the two coaches via a headset. He was in there listening, and because of the fact that JioSaavn was doing this, a non-defensive coach told Raanan that Daboll's demeanor was completely different with the knowledge of JioSaavn starting to listen in on their communication and how he really started speaking to his defensive assistants, his coordinators, and just some of those guys along those lines. To me, there's a lot to unpack there. Obviously this is a report. How true some things could be swayed, how much did people exaggerate in some of these quotes to sort of prove their point or just lead into this narrative that Brian Daboll might not be the coach for the New York Giants going forward. You always have those variables, but I think you can only exaggerate that so much before you realize that it's not too far off of the truth, really, because this doesn't really surprise me at that point. With all the reasonings that I listed before, I do start to believe that it does become a little bit too much, at that position as the head coach of the Giants, not having too much success really at all in the last few years. Something starts to tick you off, all these little things. You start almost feeling claustrophobic, I could imagine, with everybody constantly asking all these questions you trying to figure out, but almost nothing seems to be working. And coming off of this offseason where you lose Saquon Barkley, you lose Xavier McKinney, Daniel Jones, everybody's asking endless questions about, are you going to replace him? Should you draft another quarterback? Is he, or do you have the utmost confidence in going forward with him? You start to doubt yourself a little bit. You really start to get into your own head, I would imagine, and there does come moments where you snap, and of course you see it on the sidelines, but it seems like this went a little bit deeper, and just the other coaches weren't having it. There was a disagreement there, and then now you find yourself again having to reset this whole thing with new coaches coming in, trying to find a new identity. But at the same time, my biggest point with all of this and what I would take away from this story from Jordan Renan and all these other statements is that, to me, it just shows a lack of leadership, a lack of a plan, or a lack of compromise, that everybody's sort of pushing towards the same idea, if that makes sense. Everybody on a roster, to the coaching staff, to even the organizational members, to have a really contentual team, to have a really great team, an exceptional team, an elite team in this NFL, with how talented more and more this league is getting, you really have to have all those other variables in check before you start getting to the talent on the field. And that's why everybody mentions football as the ultimate team sport. And it shows why. If you have one coach that maybe just doesn't love what the head coach is doing, or you have another assistant that sides with the head coach but is telling another coach a different thing, all these little things can start to really creep in and build on really deteriorating a New York Giants team. And I think for the longest time, they've needed someone to come in and really be that leader, to change the whole identity of it. And it seemed like Brian Daboll was that guy for me. And, you know, coming over from the Buffalo Bills, the quarterback development plan strategy that he had with Josh Allen, it seemed to find itself a good home here with Daniel Jones. But after that 1 year, you know, it's not all his fault. Daniel Jones dealing with some injuries. You know, it's also not Daniel's fault, but at the same time, it's hard to build anything on that. And now you're constantly resetting each year, and it's not looking good year in and year out. And now people are calling for your job, and you obviously don't want to lose your job if you're Brian Daboll. So it starts to get a little bit heated in there, and it starts to get a little bit malicious, saying things you don't mean at the end of the day. And now you divorce yourself from your coaching staff. And after reading that, I feel like it's about as inevitable as a situation with Brian Daboll that it almost seems like his time with the New York Giants could be coming to an end. And I really don't like saying that, just because, like I mentioned, I like Daboll. I like him as a head coach. I thought his success with the Bills wasn't just something, you know, miraculous that had no real value in it. But being in New York, being in a market like this, a lack of elite skill on the field, and just that trickling over to the performances and trickling over to how week in and week out, it does become a drag if you almost get into your own mind and your own head thinking that we don't really stand a chance because the players aren't good enough. So that starts to build up more and more each week, and it just gets a little bit tiring, I would have to imagine. And just, it seems like Daboll has had this, or has been in this position for a few years now, and nothing really has gone that much better. You look back to that 2022 year, and when they made the playoffs, they won that playoff game. That almost seems like an anomaly now, more so than a breakthrough, if you know what I'm saying. It seems like at that point, everybody's surprised by them. Oh, maybe Brian Daboll can find the best out of Daniel Jones. You have a good performance. You get smoked by the Eagles in the next round, but that's sort of what led into Daniel Jones getting that contract extension. You really bought into this idea that he could be the guy going forward. But now, obviously, hindsight is 2020. Looking back on it now, more people would describe it, or at least I would, as an anomaly, something that happens very, very rarely, just once in a lifetime potentially. Not to build on it too much, but rather to see the way that they just fell off in the next year. It seems like there wasn't really a breakthrough there. It just was that weird season where the Giants were playing good. I will give them credit to that. They were playing good that year, but to not build on it, then you let Saquon go. So are you really trying to convince anybody that you're getting better? It's weird how all these transactions just went about, and now it's unfortunate for me thinking that they're just going to have to reset all over again. But I think it is required now, or else they're just going to be in this constant cycle of moving through coordinators, moving through other personnel, and not really getting to the core of the problem. I like what they have done in some instances this offseason, but I don't think it's enough to justify the quarterback play, the head coaching, relationships with all these other coaching assistants. It all behind the scenes, you can kind of get a good look of what happens with an organization that's just struggling to find out what their MO is, what their identity is. And some of these things happen, but it just seems now like Brian Daboll, his time might be coming to an end. And with this not making him look good too much either, you know it's going to be brought up at some point again this season. And I like Brian Daboll. Again, I want to stress that. I think he could be good as a head coach, but maybe just his time here with the New York Giants is up, it seems like to me. And they're going to have to find a new head coach, in my opinion, because I like Malik Neighbors, because I like their trade for Brian Burns. There is something there, but I think it is time for a new voice in that locker room heading after, I guess, this season in 2025. But let me know what you guys think. Any Giants fans or anything listening out there, do you like Daboll? Am I being too harsh? What do you think of these comments? Leave it all in the chat box or in the comment section after this episode goes off of the live air. But with that being said, we're going to put a pin in that, and we're going to move on with another break on today's show. When we return, we're going to talk some more offseason grades, shifting over to the AFC this time around and looking at the AFC North, talking about how much better some teams got and how some key losses could really affect other teams heading into this year. So don't go anywhere. Much more on today's show when we return in just a few seconds.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Moving right along with the action on today's show, we're going to get into some more off-season grades. We finished the entire NFC last episode, so now we're going to shift over back into the AFC, starting with the AFC North. Some very good teams here. Browns, Bengals, Steelers, and Ravens, all except the Bengals made the playoffs last year. So this offseason was critical. When you have a good year last year, you want to continue to build on that. At least you don't want to get that much worse, but that was the case for some teams, at least in my opinion. So with that being said, we're going to get started with the first team I wanted to talk about on the grading system for the AFC North, and that is the Baltimore Ravens. I gave them a B. I think with how much better they got, quality-wise, not so much quantity. Obviously, when you get Derrick Henry in your team, you're going to obviously improve on that side of the ball. On the offensive side of the ball, having him and Lamar in the backfield is going to be sensational. It's going to be almost as close to unstoppable as you can get, but it seems like they had more losses than they got better with the few acquisitions that they brought in, if that makes sense. The offensive line is a big one for me. With bringing in Derrick Henry, you want to make sure you have an absolute unit of a line up there, but some of the departures on that, end of things really concern me. With Kevin Zeitler moving on to the Detroit Lions, Morgan Moses moving on to the Jets, and also John Simpson also joining him with the New York Jets. That's 3 of your starters now gone. And they did draft an offensive lineman, I want to say, in the second round. But where they find the pieces to piece that together and, put out a good product, at least to live up to the standard that you set last year with how dominant the Ravens were in the running game and building around Lamar Jackson, I think is crucial. So right now, I'm a little bit uneasy on how they plan to do that, so that concerns me. On the defensive side of the ball also, letting go of Geno Smith, not only letting him go, but he signs with the Cincinnati Bengals. You let go of Jadeveon Clowney, he signs with the Carolina Panthers, and arguably the biggest loss that they did have overall on their team is Patrick Queen. They didn't attempt to re-sign him, and he signs with none other than the Pittsburgh Steelers. We love that. We love that as a Steelers fan. But they were able to re-sign Justin Madubuike, which is awesome for them. He had a breakout year, which was huge. Have some more pass rushers there. If you're going to move on from Clowney, you know you have somebody up and rising on that defensive line, so that's awesome for them to bring him back. They franchise tag them, so working out a long-term extension also just solidifies him being there for the foreseeable future. And back to Derrick Henry, a special connection with Lamar Jackson. Even though they haven't played a snap yet, obviously, you can only anticipate it's a matter of time before they really get that thing going. And apart from not having that number one receiver, like it continues to be the story with the Ravens, they're trying to do something a little bit more differently, changing the personnel here. I saw an interview that Isaiah Likely did, and he mentioned that they were going to run some more 12 personnel, having him and Mark Andrews out there at the same time. And if they've struggled to find a number one receiver, I like this idea. They also, on top of that, they drafted Nate Wiggins in the first round, and that was a steal, in my opinion, to have him sitting there so late in the draft. One of the top corners, I know he was the top corner in terms of speed, with the time that he set at the combine. They had to draft him. I like that if they're going to lose a Geno Stone or some of the guys like that. It is a good replacement, somewhat there to build on it, develop. But to me, again, the losses concern me, and I think B is fair. B is fair for them this offseason, where I still expect them to be as dominant as they have been. But those losses are something to keep an eye out for sure. Then the next team, the Pittsburgh Steelers, a B+ in my opinion on grading them. A lot of changes they came in. Compared to the Ravens, they had a lot of new players coming in, a lot of good draft picks that I loved, and a lot of signings like I mentioned. Look no further than the quarterback situation, bringing in Justin Fields, bringing in Russell Wilson, completely improving from the quarterback room that you had last year with Kenny Pickett, Trubisky, and Mason Rudolph. Say what you want about Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. I think most would take those two over the three quarterbacks that I did mention, just based on the production that you saw from all five of these guys. The Russell Wilson and Justin Fields duo definitely performed better, and that's something that the Steelers desperately needed on that side of the ball. They improved their offensive line. It seemed like a major goal that they wanted to address in 2024. They spent their first 2 picks in the draft drafting Troy Fautanu, an outside tackle, and also drafting a center, Zach Frazier, out of West Virginia University. 2 players that I think are going to be major contributors right away, making the offensive line a little bit younger, a lot more talented, I would say, also in my opinion. So I love those moves for them. And later on in the draft, they also drafted Roman Wilson, who was slowly climbing up the draft boards, in my opinion. Had a great year at Michigan, just buying into that system. And even though they didn't pass the ball as much as some other teams, he was a crucial part, had a great connection with J.J. McCarthy, and I think he could do some special things here in his first year for the Steelers. You look also at another draft pick I really liked that I just had to mention was Peyton Wilson at the linebacker position. He won the Best Linebacker of the Year award last year, and there were major injury concerns about his knees. He had some serious knee injuries during his time in college. He actually doesn't have an ACL, I want to say, in his right knee. I think that's right. I had a 50% chance. It's either his right knee or his left knee that he doesn't have an ACL, but clearly the Steelers weren't too concerned about it, and to get him in the 3rd round, I think, again, was a steal. For a guy of that talent, he claims to be very healthy. He claims to not have any trouble with that knee, so if he can perform anything like he did in college, that'll be a huge, huge addition to their defense. And also, I'd like to trade for Dante Jackson for Deontay. I think Deontay sort of ran his course with the Steelers. Didn't really take that next step. So on top of that, I'd like that addressing a position of need, especially at the defensive back position with Joey Porter Jr. on one side, you needed more help around him. I think they got better there. The only real things that loom over this team right now are finding some more wide receivers, a wide receiver too. Do some people believe in Van Jefferson and Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin? Names that don't pop out at you right away, so a need for a wide receiver too, an experienced one I think is much needed. And also the contract situations with Cam Hayward and Najee Harris. Could this be their last year in Pittsburgh? That'll be something to monitor going forward. But I think definitely more positives than negatives with the Steelers, so I gave them a B+. Then we move on to the Cincinnati Bengals, a C+, the lowest grade in this division for me because, again, they lost more, or they could potentially lose more than they brought in. Trey Hendrickson, in his situation of requesting a trade, wanting more guaranteed money, and just how unhappy he was at a time, but now it seems like he's turned the page. I don't really find a middle ground there with Trey Hendrickson being so iffy on where he stands. He wants a contract, but he's also satisfied with being a Cincinnati Bengal. I'm just not convinced that situation is just going to go away. So that's one thing. Then you get to the T. Higgins side of things, and he's franchise tagged. He still remains the only franchise tagged player to not agree to a long-term deal. Because of that, I feel like this will be his last year. I don't see them extending him and also giving Jamar Chase top-of-the-line wide receiver money, with Joe Burrow being the highest-paid quarterback in the NFL. That doesn't really work out for me. Then you move on to some other losses that they had. They lost arguably their top corner, Chidobe Awuzie, that you see there on your screen in the black and white. He moved on to the Tennessee Titans, and they already had little depth there, and now to lose him, they're forced to move one of their young defensive backs, Dax Hill, from the safety position to try out at defensive back. And how that transition goes, he could be great at it, but ideally you don't want to do that, obviously. So losing him will be major for them. Then they dealt Joe Mixon to try and get a little bit cheaper there. And you always, understand that point from a salary cap point of view. But to bringing Zach Moss and not really holding the same value, I think, compared to a Joe Mixon and how vital he was for this offense. Again, I didn't really like that too much. And especially to trade him to the Texans as if that team needed any more help. He goes there. They're a juggernaut. And now the Bengals, already not too prominent in the run game, to bring in Zach Moss. I would need more convincing there, surely, to really buy into that whole idea. But on the positive side, they did add Sheldon Rankings, who was one of the more underrated defensive tackles in the NFL. They also brought in some more security in signing Trent Brown to have him on the opposite side of Orlando Brown on each side. Now you have two great offensive tackles there to protect Joe Burrow. So that should be some positives, but I think overall, I don't like the loss of Chidobe Awuzie. I don't like how they've handled T. Higgins, his contract situation, and also with T. Higgins, Trey Hendrickson, and losing Joe Mixon. There's too many losses there of too many important players that might not seem like a big deal right now because you still have Jamar, Joe Burrow. Obviously, that is a lot more than some teams have to work with, but I think over the long stretch of things, over the season, I think it could come back to bite them in the end. So for me, that's a C+ for the Bengals. Lastly, I saved the Browns because they didn't really do too much. They didn't really get worse. They didn't really get too much better. I gave them a B- just because they were right in the middle. And some of the major transactions that they did have was re-signing Zadarius Smith to keep that entire defensive unit together. Even though he only recorded 5.5 sacks last year, there wasn't too many other options on the market, so they didn't really need to release him or move on from him. To keep him, I think, was a good move for them. The biggest move that they did make was trading for Jerry Jeudy to try and complement Amari Cooper, but they only gave up a 5th and a 6th round pick for him to Denver. So because it was so low cost and because also Jeudy hasn't really taken that next step, I'm a little 50-50 on it. He could be good. He was very good at Alabama, but at the same time with Denver, he hasn't really shown too much of that talent that got him drafted in the first round. So the trial's still out on him. Can he really be a great number 2 to Amari Cooper? But we'll see. Didn't really move the needle too much for me. And along those lines with Amari Cooper, he has a contract extension that he is trying to negotiate. So I don't know if he will hold out. He wasn't there for mandatory minicamp. At least I don't think he was there. He didn't report. And now towards training camp, inching closer to that, you'd hope that they get an extension done before that point in case there is any chance that he does hold out. You want to have all your pieces there to get this thing rolling as early as possible with Deshaun Watson. Also, like I mentioned in previous episodes, having the pressure on him to perform. You want all your playmakers there. And where that moves this team, they're basically the same team as they were last year. And they were a good team last year, but it is some of those pieces that were injured that are already on the team. You didn't have to improve this team too much, obviously, with the defense being a top 5 defense. Offensively, Amari having another solid year. The running back position with Nick Chubb, you hope that he is back to 100% sooner rather than later, but Jerome Ford proved to be a viable option there as well. So this team didn't really have to do much, so I saved them towards the end. I give them a B- because they didn't really move the needle too much for me. They're still going to be good, I believe, but a lot of it has to do with Deshaun Watson. So that's going to be a big turning point for them, a big point of emphasis going into this year. But that does it for the grades. That does it for my list with the AFC North. Leave your guys' thoughts on the grades I got. Was I too harsh on the Bengals maybe? Do you buy more into the Cleveland Browns more so than I do? Leave your guys' thoughts in the chat box or in the comments section after this episode has finalized. And in saying that, we're going to take another break from this show. But when we return, 2 more topics to talk about. We're going to be delving into more of the running back position with the Los Angeles Rams. I'm a big fan of what they did in the offseason, and the running back position is a big reason why. Kyren Williams talks about the addition of Blake Corum and how that could help their offense, plus some news off of the field. Marvin Harrison Jr. signs with New Balance, and he is set to debut their first ever football cleat in 2024. I'll give you guys the details of that and show you guys some of the pictures of some sweet looking cleats when we return after this break. We'll be right back in just a few seconds.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Continuing on with the action and looking now from the AFC North into the NFC West and talking about the running back position with Kyren Williams and Blake Corum, now the new duo in Los Angeles. I really was a fan of what the Rams did this offseason. I really love not only their draft, but almost restocking their entire team with some massive additions like Darius Williams. You get Tre'Davious White in there. The health is a major concern, but if he is healthy, he is still in a good age where he can contribute right away. And also, this team bringing in Puka Nacua last year off of his breakout year. Cooper Kupp is coming back, probably as healthy as he has been in the last 2 years. There's a lot of excitement around this team. I think there is something to be excited about with the Los Angeles Rams. And the running back position is something that I wanted to touch on because I wanted to bring up this point of how much better can the Rams be with these two guys in the backfield. Because if you just look at Kyren Williams just last year, completely out of left field, right? Completely out of nowhere. I didn't know who he was. I had no idea who he was last year. I knew it was Darrell Henderson in the backfield. I guess Kyren Williams was also back there, drafted as a 5th-round pick in a couple years ago. In 2023, just burst onto the scenes with 1,144 rushing yards, 12 touchdowns in 12 games, and also contributed somewhat to the passing game with 32 receptions and 206 passing yards. He is the first 1,000-yard rusher since Todd Gurley did it for the Rams in 2018. 6 years since Todd Gurley did it with the Rams, and since the Rams have had that level of production from that position. Crazy what happened with Todd Gurley. But anyway, talking about the Rams and how they can continue this on and even just potentially get better with Blake Corum coming in, because initially you're a little bit confused, right? Why would you bring in a running back to have sort of any sort of contribution with how Kyren Williams played? Why would you draft another running back expecting him to have some sort of role right away with this team? They already have a number one running back established coming off of a great year. This didn't make too much sense, I could imagine, at the beginning of it, because Corum, with how successful he was at Michigan, some believe that he could have gone somewhere else and had a bigger role, potentially as a number one running back elsewhere. But I'm super excited for this, and I think Kyren, in this statement I'm about to read, sort of shares that same sentiment of why I think this could be so huge for the Los Angeles Rams. When Kyren Williams made this statement talking about the potential partnership between him and Blake Corum, he said, "I'm super excited that we went to go draft Blake Corum. He's somebody that can run the ball very well, and hopefully it allows me to get to the slot or run routes out of the backfield to showcase my skills." Talking about Blake Corum, like I mentioned, he could have been a number one running back, I truly believe, somewhere else if another team drafted him, because you look at his time in Michigan, 3 years, over 3,660 yards, 56 touchdowns, and coming off of a national championship last year to cap off a very successful college career. But back on that statement that Kyren Williams made, that last part of it when he says, "It allows me to get to the slot or run routes out of the backfield or showcase my skills." I think that's a very interesting point that he makes, because not a lot of players, I think, are, what's the word I'm looking for, are, made aware of the point that this offense, sometimes in their offense, they're just limited to their positioning. They don't really think too much outside the box with this, because you look at Puka Nacua, you look at Cooper Kupp, two great options, two number one options arguably for the Rams, but outside of that, you don't really have too much to really contribute to the passing game, where I think you need some more options now that Matthew Stafford's getting a little bit older. He can't buy too much time back there on his own. He needs a lot of options available to him, whether that be through scheme, through just talent all over the field. I think you need more of that in this offense, where I was struggling to find a player to really step up outside of Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. They have Tyler Higbee, but he's coming off of a very serious knee injury. Tutu Atwell as well is another receiver that they have. Demarcus Robinson had an okay year last year, but again, it doesn't really move the needle too much, where you have some of these great offenses like the Packers, the Lions in their running game, the 49ers with, if they bring Brandon Ayuk back, they have Ayuk, Ricky Pearsall, Juwan Jennings, Debo, Kittle, Christian McCaffrey. They don't really stack up to the quantity of those options that other teams have, and that was a major concern for me. But now with Kyren Williams opening up this possibility of him moving more towards the passing game, I think it makes it super fascinating to what not only they can do, but what Sean McVay and that creative offensive mind that he that got him this job, what are their expectations now with having Kyren Williams line up in the backfield, motion out wide, or start in the slot, motion back in, with Blake Corum also out there able to get you all the yards that you need on that set of down. It makes it a lot more free-flowing, a lot more exciting, and very dangerous for opposing defenses if they have to worry about all these motions, knowing where everybody is at a set time and place. I love the possibilities. The possibilities are almost endless with this team now, and they were already good last year, like I mentioned, breaking out with Kyren Williams, the breakout of Puka Nacua. I expect both of them to get better with experience, and now you've opened up this whole new realm of possibilities with Kyren, because I really think the way I'm talking about him, you could probably understand that I hold him in a very high regard. I think he played very well, and he surprised me. And now having two of these guys with Blake Corum coming in, basically the same exact player, the same exact mold of a player at running back. Both of them are about 5'8", 5'9", 205 pounds. Very similar, so with that being the case, succeeding with a smaller back, and also Blake Corum coming from an NFL-level program in Michigan with Jim Harbaugh making the coach, makes me super confident that he could hit the ground running, right away, get carries early on in his rookie year, and they could experiment more so with Kyren Williams, get all the bumps and all the hiccups out of the way early on, stick with it through the entire year, and then by the time November, December comes along and you're in that playoff race, you're a lot more comfortable with this. Blake Corum has more experience on him, carrying the rock the entire season, and this offense can grow to another level where I think having Kyren Williams and opening up this possibility could make them reach the divisional round at least, because last year they went out in the wild card round and, they were good. They were a solid team there towards the end, but that offensive limitation, I think, kind of hindered them in that game against the Lions, none other than the Lions, and how their offense was very dominant in that game. I think the Rams slowed up a little. They couldn't just keep up. So now with this, it gives them a better chance. And also, in a time now where the NFC is so wide open with the numerous good teams, there's not a lot of clear favorites. So when you get into these close games down the wire or down to the wire, it's almost like a crapshoot. The Packers were very close to beating the San Francisco 49ers last year on the road. And also the Lions were completely dominating the 49ers in that NFC Championship game. That's how close and how, just crazy unpredictable this conference is. And it's great for the entertainment side of things as a fan. I love how unpredictable it is right now. Almost like the West in the NBA right now. There's not a lot of clear favorites. Everybody's very close in terms of talent and how good they are. I think the Rams have done a good job now of adding to that talent to try and keep up with all the offensive prowess that surrounds them, not only in the entire conference, but just in their division with the Seahawks and their offense with DK, Jackson Smith and Jigba. The 49ers, don't have to say too much about them. Marvin Harrison Jr. coming over now to the Cardinals. The league is getting more talented and finding new ways to get creative with it. I think the Rams are doing a good job of it, and I think they're going to surprise a lot of people this year. They're going to push the 49ers probably the most out of anybody in that division. I'm not crazy. I'm not going to say they're going to win that division, but you never know. It could get close, and it could get very interesting towards the end, but I'm very high on them. Let me know what you guys think about this new duo in terms of talent and how much better it can make the Rams in the comment section. But speaking of the Rams, and I mentioned the Cardinals, we're going to talk about this last segment after this next break on Marvin Harrison Jr. Off of the field this time, signing a deal with New Balance, and we're going to reveal these new cleats, the first ever New Balance football cleats that they are releasing. Marvin Harrison Jr. will be the first player to wear them when they debut in their first game against the Buffalo Bills on September the 8th. We're going to get into some more details on that, but we'll be right back after this last break on the show. Thank you for joining me on this last segment of the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to talk not so much on the field, but off of the field. It all has to do in relationship with each other. You look good, you play good, and that's what Marvin Harrison Jr. is trying to do when he signed with New Balance earlier this offseason, joining Chase Young and Houston Texans pass rusher Will Anderson as the only 3 NFL players representing New Balance in the league. So back yesterday, Marvin Harrison Jr. helped New Balance unveil their first ever football cleats that he'll be debuting in their game against the Buffalo Bills on September the 8th. He'll be the first player ever to wear these new cleats as well, with New Balance getting into more of the NFL realm, trying to dip their toe into this new sport. They already have something going in basketball and in soccer, but not too much in football, and I think they're doing it the right way, getting some of these younger guys to do it. You have a stud in Chase Young, the top pick in the NFL draft, now with the Saints, has moved around a little bit, has dealt with injuries, but has huge potential. Will Anderson, in the season that he just had, obviously with the Houston Texans, he's only going to get a lot better. And Marvin Harrison Jr., one of the best receiving prospects we've seen in a long time. New Balance is definitely going about this the right way, and in their statement to their website, New Balance claims that they have been having conversations about this since 2020, and after years of development with going through various prototypes and designs that were tested by Chase Young and Will Anderson, they finally came out with this product that I will show you guys here in just a second. I gathered some of these pictures just from online to give you guys a look at what you guys think of them. They're not too bad. Marvin Harrison Jr. there showing off another one. There are two kinds of cleat that they are going to debut. You see both of them on your screen now, but into some more details, the ones that came out, the two types of cleats that they're going to be debuting. One of them is called the Prodigy cleat. That's the gold and white one, the low top cleat that is designed for skill players ideally. There you go, you see them on your screen, the low top white ones there, the Prodigy cleat, and then also you get the black ones also, as you see there now on your screen. They are called the Fortress, which is the black ones, and they have a gold on them as well, high top cleat to provide added support to some positions that needed, like linemen, linebackers, you'd imagine. Based on the description, that is my understanding of it. But they don't look too bad. They don't look too bad when I first saw the pictures, when you see Marvin Harrison there taking pictures with them. They look all right for a football cleat. Now, I've never worn football cleats to give you guys any idea of what the feel would be, what an ideal, sense that you get off of it. But in terms of style, which is a major portion of this, I think you always got to look good out there on the field. They don't look too bad, pretty basic. But this is only the first one ever that they're releasing, so I expect them to get better and getting more experience with this in this realm of football. If they do have success with it, you can only imagine how much more they're going to grow. Getting some other players on their team as well. You already have three of the youngest best players in the NFL, so that's a good start. But I don't know what some other players, situation is with some of these brands, but you can only imagine as the league gets younger, some more talent comes in, more players I think are going to join New Balance, and they're doing it the right way. I mentioned the game that this is supposed to be worn on is Arizona's first game on September the 8th at 1 p.m., week 1 against the Buffalo Bills. But I like the design. I love how now New Balance is getting into this with the three young stars to represent their new product, and they just need one veteran presence, one well-known name to really make this thing, explode and really grow into something a lot bigger. But they are starting off, I think, on a good note, and to just keep pace with some of the other ventures that they have in other sports. I mentioned before, they're involved with soccer and some of the stars that wear some of their cleats. The biggest one that I know, Bukayo Saka, I'm pretty sure he wears New Balances for Arsenal there over in England. I want to say also his teammate Gabriel Martinelli, that could be a stretch, but I know they are more prominent also in soccer. I think Raheem Sterling, another English star playing for Chelsea, I want to say he's also rocking the New Balances. But in basketball is another area where I've seen New Balance a little bit more frequently with, I feel like I always see this commercial, the one with Kawhi Leonard, Jamal Murray, Tyrese Maxey, Cameron Brink. Those are some big names there that are signed to New Balance in the basketball world, and not only are they some of the best players and performing very well, very marketable, very good faces to market this new shoe in basketball, but now New Balance is starting to get into more in the football world, and I like the design. I think it's going to be a success. What do you guys think about them? There's not too much to really hate or love, really. They are pretty basic, like I mentioned, in terms of style, design of everything. But I like this. It seems like Marvin Harrison Jr., it goes along with being a great player. Like I mentioned before, he is, initially when I was talking before the draft, he is a guy that right away you can see being a elite number one wide receiver. And guys that get drafted right away don't just get some of these deals right away. You know, you have to be really projected and really well liked, or really well, like I mentioned, projected to be a great player if you're getting some of these, you know, deals, branding, and all these things like that. It just goes to show what kind of player people think he's going to be already. He hasn't taken a single snap in, let alone a preseason game. We're not even in training camp, and he's already pretty much the face of these new cleats of New Balance in terms of football. It's a great way of going about it. It gets more people not only attracted to Marvin Harrison, but also New Balance and the way that they're doing things. Now trying to explore the realm of football and football cleats. But it's interesting. I thought it was cool that Marvin Harrison, I've heard a lot about him on the field, obviously, but off the field, he seems like he's doing very well for himself. So good for him. Good for the Arizona Cardinals. He's going to be a great player. And good for New Balance for getting him to sign with them, getting to be the face of these new cleats. And hopefully he looks good playing with them, and hopefully he performs well in them. But with that being said, as you guys see the pictures there, to end off this episode, that'll wrap up this last segment and the show for the week. I want to thank you guys for tuning into today's episode of the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show, and also following the network on all forms of social media like Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok for more content. And also, if you want to catch more of this show, check out the GSMC Podcast Network channel and the GSMC Sports Network channel on YouTube for more content around the NFL in different forms on YouTube. And as a final reminder, tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more discussions and conversations around the NFL with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thanking you guys for joining me on today's show to close out the week. Hope you guys have a great weekend, and I expect to see you guys back here again on Monday.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn ain't that